Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into how humanity's absolute obsession with a single ancient story perfectly bridges a modern Hollywood blockbuster and a groundbreaking archaeological dig. We're going to look at how a 3,000-year-old mythological king is connecting with modern cinema in a way you probably never expected. $250 million. I mean, let that number sink in for a second. That is the record-breaking estimated budget for Christopher Nolan's highly anticipated new adaptation of the Odyssey. This officially makes it the most expensive film of his entire career, completely blowing past the massive scale of his work on Oppenheimer and Tenet. That alone tells us modern storytellers believe this story is worth an astronomical investment. And honestly, it's not just the budget that's huge. It's the sheer physical scale of the whole thing. They shot this entirely on IMAX 70mm film, which is a total first for any adaptation of Homer's ancient work. And here's a crazy piece of trivia for you. Because the format is just so massive, there were only about 25 theaters in the entire US that can actually project the film exactly as Nolan intended it to be seen. And to bring this epic vision to life, the production literally had to span the globe. We're talking shoots in Morocco, Greece, Italy, Iceland, Scotland, and Malta. Before they even wrapped things up on custom-built sound stages in Los Angeles, this sprawling, globe-trotting journey practically mirrored the wandering nature of the epic's hero. Section 1. A new spin on Homer. How Nolan reinvented a classic. You don't just drop $250 million on an 8th century BCE epic without making some pretty bold choices. So instead of relying on those older, maybe slightly dusty translations we all struggled through in high school, Nolan anchored his script in classicist Emily Wilson's acclaimed 2017 translation. It's a choice that instantly grounds the ancient epic in a much more modern, highly praised literary voice. What's really fascinating is how they shifted the characters around. In Homer's original text, the character Sinon is completely absent. He's just not in the Odyssey or the Iliad. But in Nolan's film, Sinon is a major character played by Elliot Page. See, Sinon is actually a figure tied to the Trojan horse legend, so pulling him into this specific narrative is a massive creative departure that completely shifts the ensemble. And that brings us to the gods, which is another huge creative shift. In Homer's poem, the Greek gods are highly visible, hyperactive, and constantly messing with mortal lives. Nolan, though, he minimized their visible presence on screen. He favored mystery and ambiguity over overt, CGI-heavy divine spectacle. It keeps the gods in the shadows and makes the whole story feel incredibly grounded in the human experience. Now, interestingly enough, this really grounded approach has brought out some totally unexpected layers. Several faith-based critics from places like Plugged In, Catholic Review, and Movie Guide actually noted some surprisingly Judeo-Christian undercurrents running right through this pagan mythology. They pointed out that a central moral code in the film sounds strikingly similar to the golden rule of Matthew 7:12. They also noticed a pivotal leap of faith moment that visually resembles a baptism, along with a deep emphasis on hospitality, family loyalty, and the triumph of good over evil. It just goes to show how adaptable and universal the core of this story really is. So we're clearly still analyzing and adapting this guide today on IMAX screens and in modern reviews. But all of this brings us to one massive, frankly mind-blowing question. Was Odysseus actually a real person? We know him as a character in a poem for sure, but what if he was more than that? Section 2. The Ithaca Discovery, Unearthing an Ancient Secrets. To answer that question, we've got to leave the movie magic behind and travel over to the rocky hills and beautiful olive groves of Ithaca, the mythical homeland of our wandering king, specifically to an archaeological site in northern Ithaca known as the School of Homer at Agios Athanasios. Now, this site isn't new. It's been known about for over 2 centuries. But it just recently gave up its most evocative, incredible secret. When you look at the timeline of this legacy, it really puts things into perspective. Right, so back in the 8th century BCE, Homer composes the epic poem. Then, for over 1,000 years, ancient Greeks actually maintained a hero cult at this very shrine. Fast forward to June 2025, and the Greek Ministry of Culture makes this mind-bending announcement. Based on decades of labor led by Professor Giannos G. Lalos and Dr. Christina Marbella, they've unearthed compelling evidence of this cult. And who were they worshiping for a millennium? The mythological king of Ithaca himself, Odysseus. Section 3. Myth meets reality, the line between legend and history. This discovery completely changes the game. It forces us to entirely rethink the line between legend and history, and what a fictional character even means. Just think about his two lives. On one hand, you have the myth, the wily fictional strategist behind the Trojan horse, fighting the Cyclops and resisting the sirens. But then you have the grounded archaeological reality, a figure who was actively worshipped, invoked in daily rituals, and whose name was physically etched into stone by real ancient people, generation after generation. To them, he was way more than just a campfire story. It really drives home this powerful takeaway. The legends of Homer's Odyssey were not just preserved in verse, but etched into the lives, rituals, and civic identity of the people. We are literally just the latest generation in a continuous 3,000-year-long line of human beings who are keeping the legacy of this king alive. And that leaves us with one final profound mystery to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. From ancient islanders carving a mythical king's name into sanctuary stones 1,000 years ago, to modern moviegoers lining up for a $250 million epic on a giant 70mm IMAX screen, why is humanity so desperate to turn our favorite fictions into reality? Think about that.